Welcome, my friends, to this episode of the Whole Health of Carney podcast. Today, I'm joined by my friend Chris Wasko. Chris is a spiritual counselor and psychic medium. She helps people evaluate and work towards healing individual traumas and challenges while uncovering soul lessons. Her specialty is working with survivors of narcissistic abuse and those that identify as old souls. And you can find her at www.chriswasko.com and on Instagram at chriswaskomedium. So this is a topic that I'm excited to dive into because it's something that's a little woo-woo. And Chris and I have talked about this before. It's something that I was very skeptical of and still have some skepticisms, which I want to dive into today. Because I think that there's a lot of people out there who talk a big talk, and there's a lot of people who think they're just magicians or they're lucky or all these different things when it relates to mediumship. So I'm excited to dive in today. And Chris, I'm happy to have you here with me.
Thank you so much, Rob. I appreciate this time with you.
And we've had a couple of great chats before. And, part of what led to my believing was some of the things that you identified about my life without me giving you any prior input. So I just want to start with your story, because how'd you get into this? Because I can't imagine it was something that everything was going perfectly and you said, hey, I'm going to become a psychic medium. So I'd love to have you dive into what got you to where you are today.
Oh, yeah. If you told me I was going to be doing this work even 5 years ago, I probably would have laughed and scoffed at it to some degree. I practically fell into it by surprise. Is it a complete surprise? No, because when I look back at a lot of things that I would have chalked up to coincidence of things that I knew or predicted or just had a sense of, then that just changed. It changed through an element of healing that I decided to choose me one day. I was raised by narcissistic people, and I don't want to make this about my parents being the villains or I'm the victim. I don't believe in that. I believe that everyone has the possibility to heal. It's about a choice. But about 5 years ago, I made a choice to cut off my parents. The abuse that I had dealt with in my life growing up started to touch my children and then my husband. And narcissists push boundaries until they can't. And the point that they get to where they can't is when you say enough. And they finally tried to push a boundary that I wouldn't allow being pushed. And it was going after my husband. So at that point, I was like, all right, I'm done. I'm not doing this anymore. And I chose to initially just not talk to them and kind of just give it time. But I started having anxiety and panic that I had never had before because I was terrified. When you're raised in a version of trauma, which I was, fear is a very powerful emotion. And at that point, I chose to go to therapy and to work through those fears, because my biggest fear is that my mother was going to try and take my kids away. Is it something that seems realistic now? Not so much, but at the time, when my mom is upset, she can be vindictive, and that's the worst thing she could do to hurt me. So that was step one. And, as I look at it now, that was healing my mind. As I was healing my mind, I made the choice to then heal my body. And it happened very organically. It wasn't, okay, it's time. It was, I have an autoimmune thyroid disease. I know I could heal this. I just have to figure out how. And along that time, I was introduced to medical medium, Anthony William, and I very slowly got into it. But as I continued along his healing path, I started to heal my thyroid as well as other things along my body. So at this point, I was healing my mind, I was healing my body, and in that, it opened me up to spirit and the world of spirituality, where I would be talking to someone as I'm speaking to you right now, and in my mind's eye, I could see like a person behind them. And in the beginning, it was freaking me out because I was like, oh my gosh, I see dead people. Like, I never knew that statement would ever come out of my mouth unless I was talking about the sixth sense. So it really surprised me. And I was kind of quiet about it at first, but as it kept happening, if I was talking to someone I was comfortable enough with, I would be like, hey, do you have this grandparent that was multilingual and, salt and pepper hair? And they would be like, oh my gosh, that's my mom's dad, and it would just kind of evolve from there. But when a soul moves on and no longer has a body, they can't communicate like you and I do. It's a different type of communication. And I had to learn that. I had no idea what they wanted to say, if they wanted to say anything, or if they're just checking in and saying hi. So I started taking classes to learn that. And I don't think you ever stop learning in life, but especially with things that are spiritual. So I think any developing psychic medium or anyone developing their intuition, you are always in a place where you can learn. So that is really summing that up tightly for you.
Well, just so people are clear, what is a psychic medium? Like, what do they do? And, if you had to give a little definition of that, what would that be?
So there are some people that believe everybody has the ability to be psychic, but not everyone has the ability to be a medium. The difference is mediumship is communicating with people that have passed. Psychic is, predictions, talking about past, present, future. And I kind of think, as I teach these classes where I teach people how to develop their own skills and spirituality, but I'm seeing everybody so far that I've worked with who didn't even think they had psychic ability connecting to people in spirit. So I'm kind of on the fence as far as not everyone having the ability to communicate in a mediumistic way. I do believe that it's a matter of finding those skills and knowing the tools and how to connect.
So for somebody who's like really scientific and they're saying, how do you prove this? Is this real? What is your response to that?
Well, that is a great question. I am married to someone that is incredibly scientific. He's agnostic, and this easily could have been a challenge to our marriage in the beginning. So, in some cases, I guess for someone like him, it was just seeing people's reaction, and especially people that I didn't really know. It's like, how could I know certain things when, as you said, when you and I were first speaking, you never told me any of it. And it's all energetic. So there are mediums that get into the science about it and the pineal gland and how, it is calcified or not, and how that helps you communicate. But it is all energy. So when you're getting into the scientific elements of it, it is energy and how energy works. So whether I'm working from a psychic level or from a mediumistic level, it is all about the energy and where that energy is going and how it is connecting.
So it's the energy is really a fascinating rabbit hole to dive into, because even I did my Reiki training. This was back in 2018. So we're talking about 3.5-ish years ago in the fall. And even up to that point, I knew there was benefits of Reiki and energy and all these different things. But for me, it's even still hard to explain. It wasn't until I felt the pulse of energy from my hands, or like you said, I don't know if psychic's the right word, but we had an example was we were doing like a distance Reiki session, and we basically used an inanimate object and this is going to sound wicked woo woo to anybody listening. We use an inanimate object and we were showing a picture of the person that it was supposed to represent. Call it a teddy bear was the thing we were using. So we're looking at the picture, getting a feel for their energy. And I remember moving my hands down and be like, oh, does this person have like some knee issues? They had knee issues. Does this person have, some ankle issues? There's some, like, you could feel the energy, and it's still hard to even describe. It just felt clunky. It felt like something was a little disharmonious. And so even for myself, and I'm definitely a pretty scientific guy, experiencing that was really the piece for me that changed my mind. And I still have a hard time articulating because it doesn't quite make sense all together when I think about it. But when it comes to an energetic side, I don't think there is another world that we are not even tuned into nowadays as a modern society. And when we look back at our ancestry, back at shamans and other people that were in a spiritual position, they were treating not only the body, but the energy, the physical body, the energetic body, the mental, emotional, all these different components of it as well, looking at it more in a holistic picture. And so, you said that this is something that you dove into like 5 or so years ago. And I feel like a lot of people I've heard they say they're born with it. Do you think this something, an ability you were born with and that was unlocked, or how do you think this all kind of came into fruition?
I believe I was born with it and it was unlocked. I believe my traumas, which were pretty intense throughout my life, really. I believe it buried a lot of it. When we're guided and led by fear, fear is an extremely powerful emotion. And, you know, we can look at that in society and history. The more fearful we are, the more easily controlled we are, and the less spiritually and energetically connected we are. So my childhood was a fear-based childhood. Did I have elements though, in hindsight where I could see, oh yeah, I could do that and make those connections? Absolutely. But again, I at that time chalked it up to coincidence. So I do believe we all have this in us. I believe there are blocks created in us. I work with a lot of children, and you can just easily see the difference between adults and kids. Adults have so much junk, garbage we accumulate on an energetic level because of our emotions, because of our traumas, because of our experiences that kids don't quite have yet. And it's just a lot easier to do a breakdown on a child than it is an adult. Doesn't mean you can't get there, but it's just a process. So I do believe everyone has some abilities, an element of intuition. I think it's very difficult for a lot of people to connect to the word psychic. So I often say intuition, but in my world, that's the same thing.
So and this is what's fascinating because I think most people listening have heard the word intuition before, and trust your gut instinct, listen to your intuition. Like, a lot of these phrases that get thrown around a lot, but you're right, there definitely is some sort of aversion to the word psychic because it does sound like woo woo. And for me, I think of, like movies or some, magical fairy world of, psychics, where that's, something they can do and we can't do here. That's kind of the model that I think a lot of people may feel. And so if you're saying that a lot of people have access to this, when you're teaching classes and teaching people how to access it, what are some of the first steps? Like, how can somebody listening take an actionable step? And maybe it's doing a workshop with you, or like, how do they start to really feel this as opposed to just think about it and accept it as a thought?
Well, I try and help people connect to it in ways they already have. So I'll give out examples like, have you ever walked into a room where an argument has occurred? You didn't hear this argument, you didn't see this argument, but you feel the tension. That right there, you are feeling that psychic, intuitive feel of that energy in that room. Same thing if you're meeting somebody for the first time and you feel something in you that says, I do not like this person, yet they have not said a word or giving you any indication that they are not a good person, but somehow it just, you don't mesh. Or the opposite, you feel like you've known this person for years when you've said no more than, hi, how are you? So again, that is all energy, and that is your inside, connection to other people and to the energy out there. And it's also, you could even take it a step further. There are people that are very sensitive if they're in a hospital or a cemetery, and not because of, things that they can see, but because of the energy there. I actually have to kind of shield myself going into a hospital. So I've learned that. But when I was younger, I didn't realize why I always felt so heavy. Even if I was just going for something happy, like someone having a baby, I always felt that's this pull down. So these are things a lot of people can identify with. And then as far as when I start teaching it, we all have our clair senses and have the ability to connect. And I describe those a little more. So a gut feeling, that is a clair sense. That's called clairsentience. You just have this gut feeling about somebody. So that means that is probably your primary clair. You're going to feel that first. Whereas somebody that has, is very visual, has very vivid dreams, that's a more clairvoyant sense. So they will have these kind of dreams that they can't explain. Oh my gosh, it seems so real. Well, it might have been to some degree, and expanding more clairaudience, those people will hear things. It's very common, especially for a developing clairaudient, to randomly hear their name. They just feel they are in a crowded space and they'll just all of a sudden they'll hear like, Rob. and you kind of turn around like, I think I just heard someone call me, but no one is there and they're not looking at you. So that is a common first. You might get some ringing in the ears. Obviously making sure that's not a medical condition, but clairaudience do tend to have that ringing. So that's kind of how I start, and helps people grasp onto how they are connecting, because everybody, their physical bodies are connecting in some way. It's just some areas are stronger than others. And as you start to develop those, it's, like a muscle, it needs exercising. And the more you practice, the stronger it gets. And then your other clairs kind of start jumping on board.
Love it. And that, what was coming up for me as you were saying that is I definitely do not enjoy being in hospitals. And I don't think of myself as an anxious person, but when I'm in a hospital, I definitely feel some sense of, anxiety where I'm like, I don't want to be here. I need to get out of here. But then I do wonder, is that also the side of me that maybe I don't agree with the model that is being distributed here? Like, my logical brain, like, oh, I don't like that these people are, taking all these antibiotics, or taking all these prescription drugs, or taking all these, things that maybe aren't the most holistic approach. So sometimes I wonder, is that just my mental mind saying I disagree with the intention here? Or do you think that is more the intuitive, or do you think it's a mix of both?
I think it's a mix, because I think a good way to think of it is consider how you feel about someone you might know that is not holistically minded, but you respect this person, you respect their feelings. You may not agree with them, but it's agree to disagree, and it's done so respectively. You can separate that, but you can't separate that in a hospital. So does it mean the energy is greater? You can absolutely argue that. And I am one to believe in a healthy dose of skepticism. Always have that, especially if you're ever working with someone that does what I do, because unfortunately, this is not a licensed profession. I wish it was, because it would kind of clear out some that maybe aren't in it for the right reasons. There are people that, though, are very guided to it, and maybe even fight it a little bit in the beginning because they don't quite identify with it. I mean, my Instagram handle being Chris Wasko Medium, that was a little tough to attach myself with at first, because Chris Wasko was taken. And I was like, oh no, but because I'm developing a book and trying to get there, I want to have my name out there. So I had to get to Medium, and I was like, oh gosh, because just when you start trying to grow, you have people that automatically are going to assume, oh, she's going to message me and say, I feel called to do a reading, which I would never do ever. I'm so against that. But, again, it's just, this kind of work, again, you do need that aspect of skepticism. I believe it's also part of being human. But if it comes to the point where it is blocking you and you are not listening or paying attention to things in front of you, you might be missing some things. And, it's all a personal choice, but that's just kind of what I've learned on this journey. And especially being married to someone who is not only skeptical, but cynical. And that's a big difference, because cynicism is about, I'm not listening. This is my opinion and I hold to it. And I think watching me go through this, thankfully, because we have been together for a while, it was a matter of skepticism, not cynicism. So, I think it's also understanding those differences.
Totally. And just to be clear for people listening, I'm not against hospitals. If I get in a car accident, I've said this before, I want to go to a hospital. I don't want to go to a chiropractor. There's a beautiful use for that medicine when appropriate.
Absolutely.
My point was more just, I think that it's overprescribed, overused. So want to clarify that if you need to go to the hospital, definitely go to the hospital if you need it. And, to kind of going back to your point of like the intuition of when you meet somebody too, because I tend to think of myself as someone who has a pretty good sense of, character.
Yes, I agree.
But then there's also the side that where I wonder, am I judging people based upon past experiences? Like, am I looking at the way they stand or the way they breathe or, the clothes that they wear? Like, how much of that do you think comes into play, and how are you able to disconnect from, kind of the ego side, the thought side, and really allow that intuitive side to shine out? Because I think that for me can be a tough balance to really allow that to find itself.
I love this question, because everything about learning psychic medium tools and practices is about separating from the ego, because when the ego gets in the way, then you getting your own way. So if you are letting your ego get in the way, that absolutely is a very human thing. It's what we do. We can see someone that looks just like someone we don't like, and kind of get that worry of like, oh no, is there going to be like so and so? So it's really about the energy. I am primarily clairsentient. So for me, it's about how someone makes me feel. If I get this feel in the pit of my stomach, I trust that every time. Did I always though? No, but they always proved that feeling. How often has it happened where you're like, no, I haven't even gotten to know them. I have to give them the benefit of the doubt. And you do, and you kind of let it happen. And then it somehow kicks you later. And you're like, I should have listened. I should have trusted myself. I used to do that. I don't do that anymore. In fact, I feel it saves me a lot of time and energy.
So here's another, I'm asking you some pressing questions here because
I love it. Bring it on.
So there's times where, again, I think of myself as someone who's a good judge of character, but then I may say, oh, I don't like this person. Then I meet them more and I'm like, maybe I was wrong. Maybe they actually were a good person. Do you ever find that you misread somebody? Does that ever come to fruition for you?
I think it's how you look at misread though, because oftentimes what people show us are things we like and dislike about ourselves.
Right.
So they
100%
are
true.
they're a mirror version of us.
Yes.
So there's a lesson there in many instances. And it's a matter of, do you want to face that lesson? Do you want to be faced with this version of you that you don't like? Because that's usually the point where you're going to have the resistance. You're not going to, I have yet to learn of someone who's going to resist the ones they do like, but maybe it's happened, just not in my experience. So, in some cases, like mine, for example, it's looking at your triggers. So mine's narcissism, because I was raised by that, and a narcissist can present themselves very differently in the beginning, where they talk about they have the mask, and even that mask covers that energy. You don't always feel it. And when it starts to slip is when you start to feel it. You're like, huh, that's weird. And then when it comes off and you've got this Jekyll and Hyde scenario, that's when you're like, oh gosh, this is a lesson I wasn't ready to face, because those are the ones that surprise you. And I've gotten better at taking that step back and be like, okay, universe, what are you trying to teach me here? Or, all right, I hear you, universe. I don't necessarily know what to do at the moment, but I'll roll with it. So I think that's a process we all have to feel out, because it's about feeling prepared. I'd like to be prepared. I don't like surprises. And I know that's not all that realistic when it comes to life, but do I completely cut people off right at the beginning? No. But if someone gives me that feeling, I know to trust that. And it doesn't mean they're necessarily cut out of my life, but I'm going to be a little more conservative, not reveal too much about myself. I, like to keep my private life private, because when I get those feelings, those are usually the kind of people that use information I've shared against me.
So do you find that being a psychic makes your life easier or more difficult? Because I can imagine me being tapped in that power, and I love observing people. I love people watching. I would spend all day just people watching, observing, using that. How do you find that can be a challenge at time to have that ability?
I think in some cases, yes. Whereas in other cases, it feels like a bit of a superpower. It benefits me as a parent. It also, especially when addressing issues my kids have with others, we tend to see this a lot on sports fields. When we have a coach, that could be a little challenging. And I can very quickly read, okay, this one's got some daddy issues or some mommy issues, and oh, we're overcompensating, or that kind of stuff, because it puts me in a position to better educate my child on, this is not about you, this is about them. Don't take on their behaviors. And I'm very big, especially on teaching my kids, when someone puts you in a position where you feel like you need to be a pleaser to not get a negative reaction out of them, don't play that game, because that's not about you, it's about them. And that's kind of my recycled lesson there. So that is absolutely where it benefits me. Other times when I feel like it's too much is if I've had people that know what I do, and I wouldn't say are super close friends, but strong acquaintances, and constantly want a free read. that's not a friend, because that is an energy suck for me. It is still a job. I do have to tune in and tap in if I really want to get to the heart of things. And so I've had to learn those lessons along the way of, who wants to actually be my friend versus who wants some advice on their life. But for the most part, I do value the ability to do it.
Beautiful answer. Yeah, I think that just like anything is going to have pros and cons to it, and it's just a matter of how we use the tool. And I use this example all the time. A hammer is a great tool, but if you got a screw, the hammer's not the best tool. You want to use the screwdriver or the drill for that. So, just like you're saying, we got to use it appropriately, and it can be a superpower. So,
Yeah.
I'm curious for myself, because we've done this, kind of did like a little mini reading before. But if
Mhm.
somebody is coming to you, let's say they've never spoken to you before, they're interested in, getting a reading, what would that look like?
It depends. So when people ask for a psychic mediumship read, and I'm quite honestly, that's the least of my clients. Most of my clients are spiritual counseling clients. So that is more about the psychic stuff because I'm feeling their energy. I'm tapping into their energy. They receive a questionnaire from me prior to our session, and I ask for it back before it because I tap into their energy before, so I'm ready for them. And it also saves a lot of time because I know the kind of person that is going to be working with me. I'm already getting my feels. I'm feeling their blocks. I'm feeling, I might be hearing some things like, feeling overwhelmed or, those kinds of things. And then when I meet them, again, going back to clairsentience, if they've got something going on in their physical body, I can feel that. So I actually just had one last night. I felt so stifled in my throat area. So, and because I personally was not feeling that prior to this session, when she started talking, all of a sudden I got clamped up in my throat. And so I know we have a throat chakra problem. And although I had to kind of strip down a little bit to what that was, it wasn't like immediately I got it, but I immediately knew, okay, we've got a throat chakra. And it's a problem, not a negative, not like, because the chakra system can go either way. It could be overstimulated or understimulated. And in this case, this is someone that was very stifled at work and not able to use their voice. So every session, though, is different. There are sessions I have where people are really able to get to the heart of things that they didn't even realize, or memories they've forgotten about, like I have you at 6 years old, you're hiding under a table in a kitchen. What's going on here? Because this is the crux of it. And then they all of a sudden burst into tears. Oh my gosh, I had forgotten about this. And, it's getting down to things within them. And that's why I probably like the spiritual counseling more, because it really gets to things that people not only identify with, but strongly remember. Because mediumship, when you have a loved one in spirit, there's a lot people remember, but there's also other things they don't, especially if it's like a grandparent, like, oh, I didn't really know them very well. But when it's the everyday stuff, they know, they attach. And especially when they know I don't know them, it kind of is like this amazing reaction. I do love seeing that response in people, and kind of the, oh my gosh, and the head bobbing, and then in some cases just a good cry that's released. So it's always different, but that is generally how it tends to work.
Well, just like you're saying about the story, the example you gave, someone under the table crying. One thing I've been really working on recently is something called the Enlifted program that I've been going through with Mark England. He's the leader there, the founder. I don't know if leader, so he's a leader. He is a leader. So basically, a lot of that is on word choice and stories, and a lot of the emotion sensations that come up with that. Using our word choice to create the reality we want, to get out of that victim mentality, to get into more of control. And as we're going back, part of the process is going back through old stories and noticing when we speak these stories aloud, where do we feel that discomfort? Like you're mentioning the throat. Sometimes it's in the chest, sometimes it's in the throat. All these, and we can find out, oh, from that area, maybe that is meaning this. And a lot of times it's getting through those emotions. You mentioned the crying. Sometimes we just need to release these
Yeah.
stories. sometimes we just need to dive back into that, feel the pain that we never felt through,
Exactly.
release that. And now it's, it's, I don't want to say it's gone, but it's not being held in us anymore.
Exactly. You're not
Uh,
carrying it anymore.
exactly. It's not the baggage, because we were talking about earlier how as we become older as adults, we're bombarded by so much garbage on a daily basis. It's crazy to think about when we go on Instagram and scroll for 10 minutes, we're probably seeing more images of diverse ideas and ideologies and places in the world than the average person would probably see in their entire lifetime a
Exactly.
thousand years ago, which is really incredible. And it's amazing we have that tool, but again, it's a tool. And if we abuse that tool, we're going to continue to get this garbage in our head. And you're mentioning the fear. If we look at the news, it's all fear
All
mongering.
fear
It's
based.
all
Yep.
it's all negative news, because negative news sells, and that there's a lot of
Yep.
statistics that show that. And for them, that's their business. So whether that's morally right or not, that is the business that they're part of.
Yep.
So if we're exposing ourselves to negative news, we're exposing ourselves to people on social media that maybe we're comparing ourselves to, maybe we feel superior to, maybe we feel inferior to, maybe we see things that make us feel lack. And it's like we can just have these bombardment. That might not even be conscious. That could be all subconsciously coming in. And now we're creating these stories, we're creating this negative self-talk, and then it's just held in there. Or the other side, you add that in with having an experience from childhood that maybe we didn't feel through, or even adolescence, or teenage years, or college years,
Mhm.
some experience that we never allowed ourselves to feel through. And so I think that,
Exactly.
the power of what you're saying here is you are creating an environment that people can dive into these areas, these shadow areas, to release the shadows, and also create a light to create clarity for people to move forward with.
Exactly. I do my job well when it comes to the point where a client feels they don't need me anymore. They can want me, and that's great. But I want to give them their power back. And I feel that I add a lot of value in that because I identify with it. And again, like I said, I work with a lot of kids, and, narcissism and old souls are kind of, my specialty that go together. And if I work with someone that's dealt with narcissistic abuse, they very likely are an old soul or are raising an old soul. And if on the other side, I'm working with an old soul, I know there's a narcissist somewhere in the picture. So I help kind of bring those to light as well. And that is getting more into the spiritual aspect. But to your point, when we are bombarded by these messages of fear and this heaviness, it affects our vibration. It pulls us down. So it actually puts us in a position to be less open, be less aware of things going on, because it is a form of control. Fear is a very powerful control tool. And it is up to us to not lead from that place. I know it's not easy. I've been raised by it. And gosh, did I really have to do some stripping down? But it really is a great aspect to self service you can do for yourself and healing to rise above the fear elements.
And everything is vibration, everything is a frequency. And it's something that
Exactly.
I learn more and more of on a regular basis. And like you're saying, fear is one of the lowest vibrations we can experience. And so
Exactly.
this isn't woo woo stuff. This is, science. We are electromagnetic beings. We are
Yeah.
constantly sending frequencies and vibrations through our body. Our words are creating vibrations in our reality, in our own head. The vibrations I speak are influencing you. The vibrations you speak are influencing me. And so I think an important piece for me is to be very aware of the frequencies, the energies, the vibrations, whatever the word you want to use, that I'm exposing myself to, and not being constantly, I don't know if constantly vibrating is the right word, but giving myself the space to disconnect, reground myself, and kind of reset my system. And I think that's a really essential part, is to not be constantly stimulated. Because when we're in this buzz, we're in this stress, a lot of times we don't even know how stressed out we are, how afraid we are, until we take a step back to actually calm ourselves and disconnect. And it's like, wow, I cannot believe I was just carrying a backpack full of bricks, in the analogy of stress. And we finally put that down.
Exactly.
It's like, oh, everything changes. So you give people the tools, you help people utilize tools to put down that backpack of stress, we'll call it the backpack of bricks. And so if somebody is interested in learning more about what you do, doing a session with you or many sessions with you, what would that look like and how could they do that?
So right now, the best way to contact me is via my website. And I thank you for throwing that out in the beginning. I will throw it out again is www.chriswasko.com. And I do at this time offer a free 30 minutes for anyone that is interested in spiritual counseling, because it can give them an idea of how I work, how it might serve them. And if they feel they click with me, because again, all energy, you got to feel like you click. And if not, then that's okay. You know, everyone is meant to find their path accordingly, I believe. But I do also, as a thank you to you and your time, I want to offer anyone that listens to this a code for a discount for my services of 15% off. So I just ask that when they would contact me via my website, just to write in whole health so that I know that connects to you. So again, it's 15% off any of my services on that. So, whether it's psychic mediumship or spiritual counseling, or I even do mentorship, and I offer classes, which are going to be coming in again, where I help people enhance their intuition. So, but if they just want to kind of stay informed, they could sign up for my email list. I'm always doing free workshops. I'm actually even doing one next week where I'm talking about people and their birth order and where they fit in their family and how that relates to their soul and their soul lessons. So I always like to give people information that they don't have to pay for. So, there's balance there. And yeah, that's primarily it.
Awesome. And everybody listen, 15% off is a fantastic deal. So definitely recommend checking it out. And if you are still skeptical, which maybe you are, that's totally cool. Follow along, sign up to the email list, educate yourself a little bit more, make a decision for yourself. But at the end of the day, I mean, Chris, you get results for people. As I said in our conversation we've had, you added some clarity to my life. You amazed me with some of the things that you had brought up. So I would just say be open to it. Give it a try. It can't hurt to try. Hop on a 30-minute free call. That's a pretty darn good offer. Sign up for the newsletter, and I will put all those links in the description box here. So Chris, I appreciate you being here, sharing your gifts, and I'm looking forward to everybody trying to session with you.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks so much, Rob.
Everybody listening, have a beautiful day. We will talk to you soon. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Chris. Like I mentioned, I will put all the links to everything we talked about in the description box, how you can get in contact with her, get that 15% off her services. And one thing I really want to talk about today is the Super Amino 23s. And those are pre-digested vegan amino acids, which can help build lean muscle and burn fat. So these are a core Purium product, and the Super Amino 23s is featured in the physician's desk reference for rapidly absorbing protein into the bloodstream in just 23 minutes, hence the name Super Amino 23. So these can help create lean muscle, burn fat, tighten skin, improve mental acuity. And for me, I find this to be really a great boost prior to a workout. Just gives a little bit of extra energy in there, and I found my workouts tend to have more endurance. I tend to last longer, get less tired, and just overall feel better. And then if you take this post recovery, which I recommend both, I think it's nice to do it both ways. It can be a great way to get some high quality protein into the body really quickly and efficiently after a workout. It's also a great fasting tool. This is a way to keep your fast anabolic, so you're not actually just wasting away, losing any muscle, and you can also maintain the fast while consuming high quality protein. And so amino acids are just the building blocks of protein. Anytime that we're consuming any sort of protein, our body is taking the time and energy to break that down into the amino acids, which is what actually gets absorbed by our body. So this is basically a little health hack that can help you skip that process, give your digestive system a break, and get some high quality protein in your body. So to check this out, you can go to the link in the description or go to ishoppurium.com and use the discount code wholehealth, and that will save you $50 off your first order. And check out Super Amino 23s if you want to get the individual. Awesome. If you want to get the 6-pack for the maximum gains, that's a great move as well. So I appreciate you tuning in. Have a fantastic day, and we'll talk to you soon.